This is the fourth in the series called Living Rivers, Dying Rivers. The first one was on the Ganga, the second one on the Yamuna, the third was on the rivers of Bihar, Kosi and Bagmati, and this is the fourth, rivers of the Northeast. We were to have had two speakers today, but unfortunately Sanjay Hazarika is not able to come. He's been held up somewhere else, so we have only one. I hope you'll say something about the Brahmaputra also.
Yes.
Yeah. So rivers of the Northeast, Brahmaputra and others. And we have a further series of presentations, not in October, but again resuming from November onwards, going up to March 2012, covering Maharashtra, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, rivers of the Western Ghats and so on, Tamil Nadu, Kerala. And one hopes that we'll get some insights into why some rivers are in a desperate situation, what can be done, what happened, why did they come into the state, and what we can do to revive them. And if there are some rivers in a healthy state, pristine state, what has saved them? How is it that they've escaped the general damage? I don't know how many there are of such rivers, but I believe there are some. So that is the scope of this series. And eventually one hopes to assemble all of them into a book, provided the written material is of good quality. So today we have the rivers of the Northeast, and we have Dr. Chandan Mahanta of the IIT Guwahati, who teaches environmental sciences, and professor of the civil engineering department, teaches courses on water quality, environmental management, and so on, and environmental impact assessments. And so without taking up more of your time, I'll request Dr. Mahanta to make his presentations for about what we have time up to 1:30. So we must leave about an hour for discussions. So subject to that, you can take your time. Thank you.
Maybe seeing the people here. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Of course, particularly Mr. Ramaswamy R Iyer for this whole concept of having the series of talks. When he proposed this, we very readily agreed, recognizing the fact that at a national level, we still have a lot of gaps about even knowing about our rivers. Not to talk about, the need of restoration, conservation, and all the future possibility of their development. I must also thank the organizer, India International Center, for this opportunity. Among the rivers, again, the Northeast rivers, many of them are kind of partly hidden in the Himalayas, and we know very little about them. On the other hand, if we can put it this way, perhaps Northeast is the natural playground of rivers. There are so many of them, small to big, and it is very clear that I can't do justice really over a talk to talk about so many diverse rivers. Even if you pick up one small spring, I guess there could be a couple of hours of deliberation on that. There are so many diversities, so many other issues involved. So what I'll try to give you an overview of the larger system, the Himalaya rivers coming down, finally ending up in Brahmaputra and Barak, which is, Barak is Meghna finally. And we'll then try to look at some rivers specifically to each of the state of the Northeast, because we don't know much about the rivers of Mizoram, of Nagaland. Finally, keeping the spirit of the discussion of this series, we'll look at some issues, that whether rivers are dying, what kind of river status is there in the Northeast, and is there a hope for the future, what should we do, and finally, I think, concluding with a few rhetorics, if at all, in terms of that rivers are, after all, a mosaic of moving ecosystems. So let me start with this. we are familiar with the ecological setting, and this is a relatively familiar image where the Changpo is located, how it comes. I'll just kind of try to show you that there's a thin line, and this river finally joins here, which is again joined by several other tributaries, particularly the Siang. Changpo becomes Siang after entering here. There is a branch called Dibang, and you have another branch called Lohit, and that eventually leads to the formation of so-called the Brahmaputra river. So actually the Brahmaputra is not a river which is flowing all throughout. This is known as Jangbo or Sangpo, and now we have this Jangbo Yarlung band here, which is being talked about a great deal today with respect to this possible hydropower dams that is going to come up there. The U-band. I have a better image of that U-band. Before moving on, let me take this opportunity to introduce in a very, very brief manner the Northeast vis-a-vis water resources. The geographical coordinates are fine. We have in the Northeast about more than 1/3 of the water resources of the country locked in a less than a 5% area. Now that's a huge water per capita, but on the other hand, this paradox is there that if you have such a pristine, good water resource, why then the Northeast is kind of one of the least developed region of the country? This resource would have been a vehicle of growth, prosperity, development, but it's not happening. And what is happening today? Suddenly we are waking up and trying to use this resource with respect to power generation to the tune of 60,000 megawatt. Now one has to really very, very carefully look at that. Is it a very correct approach to suddenly, exploit the water resource in one particular objective without perhaps recognizing or respecting the other needs of the river? We'll come to that during the course of this deliberation. So the vast water resources notwithstanding, there are other issues which perhaps is plaguing the possible development of this huge water resource. For instance, if you look at the fringe community of the Northeast, they are not really reflective of mainland India. One particular case is that all these fringe states have less than 30% or more less per capita income. Now that's one perhaps in some sense riding factor that makes them incapable of coping with some of the constraints by which they perhaps cannot come in terms with the water development issues at a very, very local level. People are definitely more disadvantaged. They have lesser education level, except for Mizoram, which is of course the second highest literacy states. Then there are political and social marginality, small ethnic minority groups. They are very geographically isolated. There are specific vulnerability to these communities because they are hidden from the normal civilization, so to say. Many tribes you'll find that beyond Siang, beyond Dihang, that they come to the market for sort of bartering. They don't have monetary transaction, and then suddenly they take the boat and they vanishes on the other side. When we go there in the thicker forest region of the Arunachal, we don't see too many people coming out and interacting in the so-called civilized India. And so how to go to them, and also get him into the mainstream in the sense that they sometimes feel that they own the river, they own the water. Their concept of water resource is much different from what we typically assign to. So we must recognize that the water tower of Asia, which is the Tibetan Plateau, where 6 major rivers of the entire Indo-China, Southeast Asia region originates. And here is these 2 major branches, the Ganges and the Brahmaputra. And this is where Jangbo comes. Again, now you can see there are also tributaries joining in the Tibetan Plateau part. But still there is not a very huge flow. As you can see, only after Siang enters here, after this band, and this is the place called Kobo, where the Dibang joins in and Lohit joins in, the Brahmaputra start gaining much greater quantum of water. So this argument now is gaining ground that, okay, if at all there is a diversion by China to the Gobi Desert or for this hydropower dams and to the northern China, how much really India is going to lose in terms of the water coming in. Now, on one hand, we have never done really a water mass balance along this whole border. You must be knowing that Northeast is connected to India only by 3 or 4% of the boundary here. 96% of Northeast is actually international boundary. And we don't really have a water mass balance study that how much water is actually getting to this mainland India, northeastern part, how much is being retained here, and how much finally is going out to Bangladesh. This side is, this is the Himalayan belt, and this is the Naga Patkai range. So not many rivers are flowing this side. So the whole water balance is happening around this area and finally going down here. And there are more recent studies where there is an argument also that, what about the groundwater mass balance? That we are looking at many situations where the water at the foothill of the Himalayas are more in terms of discharge than afterwards. So what is happening to the water, which actually after joining of a couple of tributaries should have been gained in mass, but it is not exactly happening for all the rivers. So there is this logic that probably the whole Piedmont zone, which is highly, infiltrable, porous, maybe taking out a certain chunk of the water to the groundwater system, and some of this deep groundwater system actually not even surfacing maybe in the main Brahmaputra, but perhaps finding its way even to the Bangladesh floodplain. So the mass balance calculation is very important, that exactly how much water really we are getting from this, upper mainstream, and how much we are getting here and how much is going out. Because after all, when we look at the discharge values, obviously we are gaining a lot here. What comes in and what leaves the Assam part or the northeast part of India is much different. So one has to really see that this whole discussion and the talk and the argument about that we are going to lose a lot of water to China may be relooked into. On the other hand, we also really exactly don't know that maybe this is going to be critical, particularly during the winter low flow time, may not be during the monsoon. So this is something which needs to be really looked into in future. You can see that even comparatively, if you look at the Ganges and the Brahmaputra, the quantum or the mass of water, even if you look at the general spread of the water, is much more. So Brahmaputra definitely carries more water. And here is this interesting case that many people, have this debate whether Ganga is a tributary to Brahmaputra or Brahmaputra is a tributary to Ganga, because they are both joining there. And always, of course, it comes as GBM, Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna. And eventually, Ganga, Brahmaputra joining. Brahmaputra, for your information, as it enters Bangladesh, becomes Jamuna, not Yamuna, but this is Jamuna. They use a J here. Ganges join here. And then we also have a counterpart, Padma, happening after Ganga and Brahmaputra as Jamuna joining. So you have Padma. And finally, you also have Meghna coming in, which is actually Barak or Surama in the southern Assam. So many people don't recognize this Indian part. Actually, a large part of Meghna is also within India, starting from Manipur side. In fact, it's a freak of nature. You will see that this river, unless this should have taken a U-turn and in the geological past something happened, it should have been actually flowing this side and by the side of Irabati. It would have been a totally different case altogether. But today, somehow it has taken this turn, found its path through the Himalayas, lesser Himalayas, gone in there, and finally goes to the Bay of Bengal. And here, there's a suggestion. You will see that a great deal of suspended sediment load is coming. This is something, again, not being talked about much, but this has a huge implication in terms of nutrient transfer, in terms of, the coastal dynamics, and in terms of the whole ecosystem sustainability and all that. Because we know that the particles that comes in the water carries some type order of magnitude nutrient than the dissolved load. Now, looking at the river network, you will perhaps start appreciating that what an intricate network of rivers we have. And again, here we have not really shown the first order, second order, or third order streams. And this is a project we did for Ministry of Environment and Forest to develop an inventory of Northeast rivers. And here I tried actually to bring in some names, but the list becomes endless. And all these names are pretty difficult. You'll see some of these names are even unpronounceable because locally they are, somehow interpreted like that. So these rivers that you see in the map, these are all georeferenced. they are all having spatial positioning in terms of coordinates. So every single point in that river are pinpointable. And we have this whole inventory. In fact, we have developed a overall water quality monitoring system for Northeast rivers. So anywhere in this river, you can go in the map and you can find, we don't have too many quality parameters all along the river, but there are segments, there are points where we have tried to have a mapping. And this is actually an interactive portal. We are planning to host it on the web. So then, many of this information will be readily available. And as you can see, look at Tripura, so many rivers. Look at this whole Aizawl, the Mizoram part. You see, these are all, and Mizoram, if you happen to go, you'll find these are all series of ridges. Unlike the Himalayan part or the Naga Patkai, the Mizoram hills are very different. It is one of the also riskiest airport for your information because the airport comes along a tunnel. So any weather problem, immediately the flights are cancelled. But it's very risky actually. Both sides, this is almost like a narrow gorge getting into the airport. But the rivers are all distributed, and I must also tell you that where you see a bit of a less number of rivers in terms of density, these are basically because we could not go there, because we could not map. They're all under thick forest. So you can't see the rivers. Essentially, the densiest, the most dense mosaic that you can see can be extended to all the areas, because here also there are a number of rivers. And we really wonder sometime, now here is the area where we are proposing about 150 plus hydropower projects. The pre-feasibility studies have been completed, but we can't even see the river properly. So we really don't know when they will be unearthed, when the forest cover will be removed, when the foundation will be looked into, and all those investigations. It's a big, it's a long way to go actually to finally convert this region for these mega projects. We'll come to that, but essentially we have also covered Sikkim. So now we have, as you know, Northeast used to be known as the land of 7 sisters, and now they say we also have a young brother, which is Sikkim. So there are 8 now, and the Sikkim rivers are also going to be discussed during this particular deliberation. So these are sort of a good mapping we have done, but we still have to know a great deal about their physiography and the other greater field-based details.